Yeah,
Am I sharing the right screen? You're just seeing
your
the
side.
presentation, right, in full screen?
Correct.
Cool, cool. So yeah, welcome all. Thanks for attending this event. So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Kevin Ivasco. I'm a technical architect at Lightfold. I'm also a community leader for the Salesforce developer group and also an analytics champion. So just forward-looking statement, please make sure to make purchasing decisions based on currently available features and functionality. So I am here to share to you some cool announcements from the virtual TrailheaDX, specifically the architect and developer sessions. To see the complete list of announcements, you can visit this site. So go to salesforce.com/trailheaddx, and you would see that there are 4 channels: developer, admin, architect, community, and ecosystem channel. In each of the channels, say architect channel, you would see lots of sessions, basically lasting from 20 minutes to 1 hour. So if you want to learn about each of the topic, you can just log in from this site using your Salesforce Trailblazer account. Right. Going back to my screen. So let me start by saying I really love Salesforce because of how they respond to COVID. Their efforts to help everyone in the community is just exceptional. Do you all agree? I'm sure you all do. One of the architect sessions was about the COVID-19 Data Hub and the COVID-19 Data Platform. The COVID-19 Data Hub was developed by the Salesforce Tableau team in response to COVID because they believe that data is a massive part of everyone's return to work journey. After its initial release, the product team realized the need to scale and grow beyond, hence the development of the COVID-19 data platform. Using different technologies from Salesforce, Tableau, and MuleSoft, the COVID-19 data platform gathers, unifies, and delivers trusted COVID-19 data not only to Salesforce customers but to the public. The COVID-19 data will allow businesses to fight the pandemic to recover faster and help employees get back to work safely. Without a pipeline to the latest COVID-19 data, businesses would have a hard time reacting efficiently to the pandemic. If you haven't explored the COVID-19 data platform yet, it's still not too late to do so. You might be able to think of a great way to use the data. So if you open the content from the salesforce.com/trailheadx, you would have access to this key resources. So say, for example, the data hub. So from here, you would have access to the Tableau dashboards showing COVID-19 data and many more resources like the COVID-19 data tracking API, which is from MuleSoft, and also this one, the COVID-19 data platform. So there are lots of resources that you can get from this session. So I highly suggest that you open that session content and you would see this, hoping that it would help you and your company fight COVID-19, the effects of the pandemic. Next one. Yep. So for this one, thanks to Kevin Glover for sharing this cool announcement. The next one is MuleSoft. So who uses MuleSoft here? Probably plenty of you are already using it, and the remaining most probably would like to try it too. So for those who don't know yet, MuleSoft is the world's #1 integration and API platform and is serving as the integration platform layer of the Salesforce Integration Cloud, which has 3 layers: the integration platform, integration builder, and the integration experiences. Customers' data need to digitally transform, naturally live in different systems and applications, often varying by vendor and capabilities. With the help of MuleSoft accelerators, the required assets for specific Salesforce clouds like Service Cloud and Commerce Cloud are already packaged. This ultimately leads to easier and faster integration to other systems like OMS, Jira, ServiceNow, PAM, and SAP. Who wouldn't want your tools to be packaged and ready to use, right? No more choosing and picking out of so many tools. MuleSoft developers would be definitely excited to try this MuleSoft accelerator. If you want to learn more about this, just open the key resource. So this is in the MuleSoft Exchange page. Yep, from this Exchange page, you would have access to the MuleSoft accelerator. So yeah, you have here the use case. All right, so this one was announced by Port and Esther from the MuleSoft product marketing team. So thanks to them. Next one of the architect sessions is the release management patterns with Salesforce. So employees who are involved in DevOps would be excited about this for sure. As developers and admins, we talk a lot about release management and all the tools you can use to create a robust process that solves common pain points such as changes getting overwritten, bugs getting into production, knowing which teams own what code. To help us solve these problems easier, Salesforce published a Trailhead module called Application Lifecycle and Development Models, which would help us learn about the release management patterns that are pro code and low code. This release management pattern would help us release features and products with confidence, minimizing or solving the common deployment issues, less, if not no more, changes getting overwritten, bugs getting into production, and knowing which teams own what code. To learn more about this release pattern, just go to Trailhead and look for this module, the application lifecycle and development models. So for this one, thanks to Claire and Rohit for sharing this very cool announcement. Next is deliver event-driven architectures with Salesforce. This one is actually one of my favorites. By using event-driven architecture, you will be able to make your visual components such as Aura and Lighting Web component and your backend automations such as Apex to communicate with each other, producing a more harmonized processes resulting to a much better user experience. If you haven't had the chance yet, you can research about platform events and change data capture. You can visit Trailhead to learn more about this too. So you would find this in the key resources when you open it in the salesforce.com/TrailheaDX. So this one is a platform event basics. So there is a Trailhead module, and the other one is change data capture basics. Using an event driven architecture, developers like us will be able to build real-time scalable apps and integration. The problem with the traditional app designs is that they do not use an event-driven architecture, and they tend to involve hard-coded dependencies that are basically not scalable because components are tightly coupled. With the help of platform events and change data capture, you can decouple apps and drive real-time processes across your systems. So that's it for the architect sessions. We now move on to the developer sessions. So there are actually really lots of contents. We can cover everything because we have a limited time. Just make sure you visit again the salesforce.com/trailheaddx to learn more about the rest. All right, let's move on to the developer sessions. So this one is something to watch out for. Improving quality of life, Apex updates to ship better code faster. What's new? Salesforce is building new Apex features and tools called Safe Navigation Operator and Transaction Finalizers. Both are still not yet generally available, but it will be coming soon. I'm excited about this because for say for safe navigation operator, it would simplify our code by not having to explicitly perform null checks. What does that mean? Basically, we won't need to write null checks in Apex, such as if list is not null, process list, if record is not null, access the field, and many more. So basically, it would de-risk the chances of having null pointer exceptions because you just forgot to perform null check. Next one is the transaction finalizers. With transaction finalizers, it would allow us to perform post processes to auto run when queuable classes complete. How does that help us as developers? We don't need to make a chain of queuable classes anymore. Transaction finalizer is a simple and more logical flow of execution of asynchronous events. I definitely use this one when it becomes available. Hopefully very soon. Next one, this is the most futuristic one out of the developer announcements. It's about how to harness Einstein vision and language into any app. Einstein vision and Einstein language are services that are part of the Einstein Deep Learning API. Einstein vision and Einstein language are two different AI services, but they work hand in hand. Einstein vision uses the power of image recognition to automate data entry, analysis, and classification. Einstein language, on the other hand, would use the power of natural language processing to determine sentiment and intent. This is a super interesting area to explore. I myself have been playing with the Einstein language API and find it super amusing on how API can solve problems by getting sentiment and intent. New pilot features are business card and form reader, meaning you can scan images and then turn them into text. Pilot programs, multiple languages, out of domains, data augmentation, named entry recognition, optical character recognition. Lots of jargons, but it will be fun once you get your hands into it. So yeah, you can access this Einstein Deep Learning API. The link to this is this one. Just visit einstein.ai/products. You would see the two services here. Both services can be accessed using REST API. So feel free to explore on this one. But make sure you have an org that has Einstein licenses, because I think these two are paid features. All right. Last of my slides, but not the least because this one is close to my heart, is the Salesforce Analytics Developer Experience announcement. Being an Einstein Analytics specialist, most of my work are related to Einstein Analytics and Einstein Discovery and its integration from and to other systems. There is a new VS Code expansion for Salesforce Analytics. This extension pack will allow analytics developers to build assets within VS Code instead of building it using Analytics Studio. What's cool with this one is the release management for analytics assets will be much streamlined, especially for enterprise scale projects because of especially if they have lots of moving analytics assets. Next one is the Tableau Viz Lightning Web Component. It will allow us to embed Tableau visualization into Salesforce via Lightning Web Components. So it's an open source code that developers can use so that they can customize it depending on the business needs. This one is still in beta, but feel free to play this code and yeah, see how you can integrate this to your uh, implementation using Tableau. Lastly is the Tableau plus Einstein API. This one is still in dev preview, but the intention here is to incorporate Einstein Discovery's powerful AI capabilities into Tableau. What can it possibly do? A lot. And I mean really a lot. So imagine if you can build a Tableau dashboard that shows a trend of customer engagements, but have the capability to drill down on every account and get a prediction for, let's say, propensity to churn, propensity to upgrade, and many more. So we would be able to generate lots of actionable insights for the data displayed by the dashboards and have the capability to drill down on every customer. So yeah, exciting times ahead. I can't wait to try these new features, and I'm also super excited for the coming soon features. So Salesforce is really an awesome space to be in at the moment. And yeah, thanks all. And I hope I was able to impart some knowledge to you. I'm excited to speak with you again. So for those who don't know yet, I have a hands-on technical session this July 29, 6 p.m. And I will be demonstrating how to deploy predictive model in your Salesforce orgs. Yep. Thanks all and speak soon. That's it, Francie.
All, all right. Thank you so much for that, Kevin. Right. And then for the next one, it's time to, to the time for the main event, right? So we'll have Joey Chan to introduce our speaker for today.
No. So this Joey, by the way, we are honored to have our guest speaker for the day. Being in the Salesforce ecosystem for more than a decade now, he's someone that I personally look up to in the Salesforce development world. He's been with Salesforce for the past 10 years and is currently a developer evangelist and leads the EMEA developer relations team. Let me introduce you to you, Peter Chittum, Senior Director, Developer Relations at Salesforce.
Hello, everybody. Give me a second here because I've lost my Zoom window. And, being the highly skilled technical professional that I am, that's pretty remarkable. Let's see. If we bring that in, so there's those.
Too many windows, I guess, right?
Well, like the actual meeting full screen, it was in kind of its own space. So
right.
Let's see if I can figure this out here. There we go. All right. So I found you. That means I can also do that, which is good. You can see me.
Okay.
I'll just adjust my camera a little bit so you can see like my whole head and not my head cut off. And then let me also switch over to, I'm going to do a few slides and just a little, just to explain a little bit kind of how we're going to go through this. I'm going to do some slides. I've got some live demo. I've also got some recorded demo videos for some of the features that I'm going to be talking about that are in pilot. And that's going to be kind of the whole show. So let me first off, all right, I'm just going to close participants for now and go into share screen and see if I can find that one. Good. And we'll share that. And then I'm going to plan on driving everything from there. So I should be able to just keep that open. And if I go to present, with any luck, you should be seeing the presentation in presentation mode right now. Yeah? Look good? Hopefully.
You can see your screen, yeah.
All right, great. So there were some really great announcements at TrailheaDX this year, and some really cool features that we're just beginning to make available to customers in small amounts in the form of pilots and pre-releases and that sort of thing. So I'm going to talk about some features that are not currently in the platform. And of course, as usual, any forward-looking statements that I may make, please don't use those for making any purchasing decisions. So as was said, I am Peter Chittum. I lead the developer evangelist team. My team is based in both EMEA and North America. So I'm kind of in a transatlantic role, but I do live in England. And yeah, I've been at Salesforce for 10 years. That entire time I've been doing developer enablement of some form or another. So it's really, really lovely to be speaking to a bunch of folks in the Philippines for the first time. And, I think it's been a very difficult year this year for everybody. If we can say though, one of the I think amazing silver linings of this period of time has been that we've been able to meet more people across the world as we've all gone virtual. Virtual spaces are much easier to connect to one another. So I'm super pleased to be able to speak, maybe not in the Philippines, but to the Philippines for the very first time. And it's a great honor. So thank you. And thank you also for your group leaders for being willing to have someone from Salesforce come and speak to your meeting. The call was put out and not every developer group necessarily signed up for it, but everybody who's here on the call today, you should also be thankful for your leaders for reaching out and making sure that this was an opportunity for all of you.
Glad to have you, Peter.
Excellent. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Salesforce Functions to begin with. Salesforce Functions is a new feature. We announced it at Dreamforce. It was announced as Evergreen Functions. And naming-wise, we are dropping the Evergreen branding and just calling this Salesforce Functions. And essentially, this is a way of providing functions as a service to your Salesforce environment in a way that is seamless, that keeps the Salesforce trust boundary, but also takes advantage of elastic compute capabilities that are readily available in lots of platforms. And this isn't something that is completely foreign to Salesforce implementations. In instances where perhaps the amount of data or the type of calculation that needed to take place as part of something that needed to be done for your Salesforce project or for your implementation or for the business requirements, perhaps Apex wasn't necessarily the best way to do that. And so there have definitely been projects where people have sought to offload some of that compute capability to external systems, whether that's AWS or Heroku or Azure or Google Cloud Platform, obviously those being probably the most common ones, commonly available ones. However, to make that happen is tricky. There is a good deal of integration that needs to take place. And so functions is really a way of performing that same bit of functionality, but making it much more seamless with your normal Salesforce developer workflow. Now, I think that pretty much lays out all of the value propositions here. Pretty much said all of these already. So a few more details about Salesforce Functions. The idea is that actually, if I go over here, let's see if I can grab my little pointer. There we go. So these are going to be invocable from a number of standard features that are already on the core Salesforce platform. So things like platform events and CDC events, Lightning Web Component direct invocation, invocations from Flow is really interesting. Imagine something that could perform that elastic compute, but it was surfaced in a way that an admin could make it part of a flow that they were building, and not have to know Apex necessarily, which is of course, the standard one, or the one that probably most people would expect, is to be able to invoke something like this from Apex in the Salesforce world. The other cool thing is that, what are the languages that we are expecting to be able to run on these? Currently, for the generally available version of this, we are looking to scope this for running Node.js, Java, or Apex. And of course, this is one of those forward-looking statements. Until something is made generally available, you never know what might actually happen. But certainly the plan is for this to run in a containerized environment where fundamentally the environment that is running it is not platform specific. These are the ones that we're looking to scope for now. I imagine, under the right circumstances, we might expand those at some point in the future. Certainly, there would be nothing technological that would be an obstacle to that in the long run. We're also looking at making this something that could be reachable via an external HTTP request. So I think that's really interesting as well. And then this here represents, I think probably the most important piece of this, which is, I referred to this as being inside the trust boundary of Salesforce. And the important part of that is that, in the cases where these features were built and then integrated with Salesforce, a given Salesforce customer might have needed to certify not just Salesforce, but Salesforce plus whichever platform the external function is going to run on. So in the case of Salesforce functions, the idea would be that everything that we would build would be sitting in that Salesforce trust boundary. And so you would only need to certify Salesforce as the provider for your application functionality. And then eventually we're also looking at different managed data stores that could fit different semantics of how that data is stored. So obviously something like a SQL versus like Redis, which is more like a key value store, or Kafka, which is more like a data stream or logging functionality. These are different ways of dealing with or handling data. And of course, these are already available in Heroku. So it's natural for us to be looking at how to make these applicable and accessible from the functions container runtime. So that's kind of a big high-level architectural vision, let's call that. I'm really interested to see like where they're going to take this, or which things are actually going to end up being available when they go GA, hopefully sometime next year. What I can tell you is, as we've been able to play with these a little bit internally. We've been going through blitzes from time to time where we'll get access to the current version of functions, we'll play around with it, and then engineering will take it and kind of learn from that and go and iterate on that. As of now, the main features we've been building have been Apex invoked functions, and currently that's what's been available on the pilot. So I'm really curious to see how some of these other things will end up being surfaced. Certainly if it's surfaced in Apex, you could always surface it as an invocable function to a flow, but obviously, sometime in the future, it'd be nice for that to be much more automatic and seamless without having to actually write the invocable function, or sorry, the invocable method in Apex. And as I alluded to, the key reason for functions really is, Apex is a great language, as a domain-specific language for business-based operations related to Salesforce. It has been a remarkable success. There's some over 100 billion transactions a month, I think, was what Chris Peterson, the product manager, quoted recently. So, that's a lot of Apex running a lot of times, every given month. However, as a DSL on the type of platform, on the pod-based multi-tenant platform that Salesforce is, it doesn't fit every use case perfectly. So there are a lot of cases where things like, financial calculations or work order generations, very heavy database operations, image processing, or really, really massive queries. Things like, scanning lots and lots of data and cleansing it, or building APIs, web APIs over your data. Those aren't necessarily the best things to use Apex for. And so this is where functions could be a really, really interesting option for a lot of projects that are looking to, are really pushing the limits of what Apex can do today. All right, so there is a sign up here if you want to sign up for updates. So pilot, I think currently they're not taking new entries to the pilot. However, you can sign up here, and as progress is made, you can get on that mailing list for information about that. All right, so I think what I'm going to do now is I want to break out and show a little bit of a demo. Let's go over here. There we go. A little bit of a demo. This is actually from TrailheaDX. This is not the session. However, it is the demo. And I just want to draw everyone's attention to that if you go to the TrailheaDX website, there is an online demos option. And there's a lot of great content beyond what was just in the sessions or the episodes, as they were called. So go take a look because you'll find a lot of additional stuff kind of above and beyond. There's certainly some overlap like this one, but I like this one because it kind of jumps right into a more meaty demo of how functions work. Yeah, so let's go take a look at that. So this is Becky Hymas.
Regarding this one, am I correct? It's powered by Heroku, is that right?
So as I understand it, it's not directly running on the same Heroku infrastructure, but Heroku, of course, runs on AWS, and underneath functions, we are running those containers on AWS instances currently. So
nice.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to sort of fast forward this to where she kicks off into the demo because I kind of talked through all the stuff that she already talked through at the beginning. Now, I don't think you'll be able to hear her audio, and I'm not sure if I can actually pipe the audio into the Zoom meeting. So I'll narrate a little bit as we go along.
You'll have to stop sharing, and then there's going to be a checkbox at the bottom to allow you to include the audio.
Let me give that a try. Okay. Okay. No. Oh, right. So if I do stop share.
And then if you click on share, there's going to be a button where it would ask you for
there we go, share right? Computer sound. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right.
From NPM to make my development more efficient. So to get started, we have here our development environment. We have an index.ts file, And here's a description of this function. It's going to create an account, contact, and opportunity object all together in a single transaction using the unit of work API. So here we have the unit of work API, and we're going to create the account, the contact, and the opportunity objects. Here at the end, we're going to commit. So let's see how this looks like. Let's run the Salesforce function locally to test it out. So we do function start, and we're going to wait for the ready to process signals that it's going to give us. All right, it's ready to go. So now here in the other tab, I'm going to run SFDX function invoke. And we're running the function locally, but using the scratch arg here at the end, account-fx.scratch6. We're going to run these. Here we go. We got the 3 new records: account ID, contact ID, and opportunity ID. And let's open Salesforce to see how this looks like. All right, here we go. So we got that account object. We also should have the contact, as we do, and also let's check opportunities, and we do. So let's deploy this function now. Let's use function deploy. And let's see, let's wait a second. It takes about like 20 seconds to do this. It should be like a cooking show that I have the pre-baked thing in the oven already. And there you go. That's it. Now that we deploy the function, let's execute it from Apex. So what we'll do is we're going to run force apex.execute. And now note how we're referencing this file here that has account apex execute.txt file. I want to see what's in this file before we execute it. Let's open VS Code and check it out. So basically, this is doing a system.debug to print out the result of functions, function.get, the name for function, account function, and then with this JSON payload, we're going to invoke it. The payload is setting account name to account name, contact name to contact name, and opportunity name to opportunity name for all those new records that we're creating. So let's go ahead and run these. So once this, okay, it compiled successfully, it executed successfully. This is the debug message for what was printed, the new account ID, new contact ID, and the opportunity ID. Okay, let's open up our Salesforce org now and verify that those records were created. Again, all right. So there we go. Now we have 2 records. Before we only had that 1 record, and here's the new account with a random number appended to the end, the one that we just created. But I wanna give you a little sneak peek into the power of functions and something that wasn't available to you before the Salesforce platform. Not only that you can test things locally, but I'm gonna go back to VS Code. And since our function was written in JavaScript, well, technically this is TypeScript, but it's compiled to JavaScript. Since it was JavaScript, it means that we can also use all the other open source packages available from NPM. And I'm going to change things up a bit and use the fetch package. And with that, we're going to reach out to an external web service to enrich our opportunity data. And it's going to return an estimated probability. And again, this is a hypothetical example, is going to return an estimated probability of success for this opportunity based off a contact name. So we add the code. Let's go ahead and run this locally. So we go back up and we start it up. And once this is done, in a couple of seconds, all right, and now ready to process signal, like we're gonna invoke it from the other tab. Once this is ready to go, we're going to check. Let's wait until this is done. Okay, great, it's done. So now let's open, let's look at those opportunities again that we've created in our Salesforce org. So the first one, the first opportunity that we created should have here under details, should have the default probability that was 10%. But now if we go to the new one, the latest one we created, if we go back to details, note how it is 49%. And this is our custom probability that we created for the new record.
Okay, so I think, now I'm not sure, do you still hear me now that it's piping the computer sound as well? Okay, great. So I think that gives a good taste of, the feel of how functions are going to work, how they're going to be invoked. I think, back here it was about 340. You have to use your imagination a little bit on how your Apex code would be invoking this. So for instance, functions.function.get is a way for you to go and find a function that you can invoke, basically get a handle to that. And then once we have a handle to that, function.invoke, passing in an object is, again, there's a way that you can actually invoke the function that you've retrieved. So it's pretty classic, get a handle to the thing, invoke the thing, and then it's going to return something. And in this case, we're just returning it to a debug. But I think, again, sort of stepping back a little bit further, see if I can get back to where we can see some of the code that she's demoing. These things that we see here now give us an idea of, how we're going to be able to interact with Salesforce in this case, a JavaScript or TypeScript TypeScript programming language, using the things that are surfaced. So this context object, for example, that's the thing that's actually getting us access to the Salesforce environment that is invoking the function. We actually pass that in. Payload is anything that we're going to pass in, any data that we're going to pass in. So context is basically the environment information. Payload is the data for this instance of the function. And then I don't know if we, and then we actually see the logger here. And of course, logger is of course something that is also made available in the function context for doing things like logging, debugging, and such. So I think that gives a little bit of an idea of, what are, what we can expect from functions, hopefully, until it's generally available. I don't want anyone to get too tied to exactly how this works, but I think, this gives you a taste of what would the developer experience be like a little bit. And additionally, hopefully you can start to use your imagination. Maybe you've bumped into a use case yourself where you could solve the problem with Apex, but it was really hard to solve with Apex, where if you'd have had something that was a sort of scalable, elastic compute environment, it might have been a lot easier to solve that. I would love to hear back from folks. If you have any ideas, how would you use Salesforce functions? Because we can always pass those on to the product management folks. They're always interested to hear, like, what are the use cases that you're interested in using functions with? So I certainly welcome that feedback. All right.
Quick question, by the way. Based on the example, it looks like it's actually doing asynchronous processing, right?
So I believe they're looking at ways of invoking functions that are either synchronous or asynchronous. So in this instance, I believe this function is actually being invoked here in a synchronous way, right? However, there is another way to invoke this where instead of, essentially waiting for the return value of invoke, you can invoke this and identify essentially a callback method, a callback Apex method that would handle the response as and when. Obviously, if if it's not too long of a call out, and you want, a sort of immediate update to the user interface or something like that, you might want to think about the synchronous invocation. If you're happy to sort of throw the function call over the wall and let the update happen behind the scenes, and then eventually the output of that function gets surfaced to the user somehow, then asynchronous is going to be better. And obviously for any really large, long-running transactions, you're going to probably want asynchronous anyway. So not probably, you will want asynchronous.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Any other questions on that before we continue? That sounds like no. Obviously, you know, there'll be a little time to answer questions toward the end of the call anyway. So, you know, if anything occurs to you that you want to ask later, you know, the door isn't closed. Yeah, feel free to pop those up. I'll do a more open Q&A at the end of this anyway. So let's continue. So what I'm going to do here is just a little bit of an introduction. And one of the requests on the part of the organizers was to talk, you know, just kind of more broadly about developer workflow, developer tooling, etc. So I have a few things. You know, this is going to be kind of it's a fairly loose demo. I've not spent a lot of time honing this into a really nice, well-defined script and pattern. I just want to share some of the ways that I'm using the current tooling in Salesforce. And then we'll come back and we'll sort of draw some parallels to how that's going to fit in the context of Code Builder, which was one of the big announcements that we made at TrailheaDX. So Code Builder, just to do a brief intro now, you know, the easiest way to think about it is of a web-based IDE. Now, the web-based IDE that most of our developers are familiar with today is, of course, Developer Console. And I can say that I was here before Developer Console existed. We had something called Debug Console that you could just throw some anonymous Apex into and see the logs output from that. So, you know, Developer Console was a huge step forward. You know, obviously, however, Developer Console was a very specific application that was, you know, very much built as a custom web-based IDE for Salesforce. With Code Builder, what we've done is we've taken the investment that we already have in Visual Studio Code, and we are going to be applying that to a new feature, a new sort of OEM feature that Microsoft has called Visual Studio Code Spaces. And Code Spaces is an online web-based IDE infrastructure that Microsoft is building out. We're working very closely with them in partnership to apply our Code Builder to that OEM workspace. And we'll kind of, I think once I go through a few bits of the workflow, you know, I'll then come back and talk more about Code Builder. Some of the other really important developer productivity features that are coming out are things like mobile development emulators with iOS and Android, a lot of improvements to the Salesforce CLI. And as part of Code Builder and Visual Studio Code, we're starting to build a new SOQL query builder. I think one of the most popular reasons why people go to Workbench and use Workbench is because of the query builder feature there. You know, understandably, a lot of folks who aren't coders, you know, don't necessarily understand all of the deep details of SOQL syntax. And SOQL syntax is very declarative, just like, you know, most data manipulation languages are. And so, you know, it's natural to want to go and say, well, I want these things. You tell me what that SOQL query looks like. And that's exactly what the query builder does in Workbench. You know, Workbench has never been a supported tool. So this SOQL query builder that we're looking at rolling out is going to be a fully supported query builder, you know, on the platform. So look for that coming up soon. However, I don't have even like a video to demo of that, in fact. So I'm not going to go there at all today. I think the other thing that's also really exciting is the new DevOps Center. And I would encourage everybody to look at the episode about DevOps Center. Some of the things I'm going to show you are using Git and GitHub. And if you're familiar with Git and GitHub, it's great. Like, you'll follow everything that I do. If you aren't so familiar with it, unlocking the power of Git as a version control system can seem a little bit arcane and unreachable. I would argue that it's not. It really takes practice. But if it seems like it's too much of a hill to climb, the DevOps Center is going to be a way that our admins will be able to tie into version control systems that developers are using so that everybody can develop using the same source of truth. And I think that's going to be a huge benefit to everybody on projects for Salesforce. All right. So like I said, I'm going to come back and talk a bit more about Code Builder. But for now, let's jump in and kind of go through some developer workflow things. Okay, now this is a project, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Hopefully people can see it better now, yeah? So this is a project that I started just this morning to do this demo. I wanted to highlight what I think is one of the coolest features that we've come out with recently, which is local development for Lightning Web Components. And to underscore what this is, I have a Scratch org that's associated with this. You can see down here, hopefully you can see down there, this demo_local dev, that's my default org. And in fact, if I go here and I say open default org, I'm not sure which browser window that's going to open in. There we go. So I've got two monitors, so so there's my default org. And just to highlight the power of local development, if I go down here into custom code and I look at Lightning components. All right. Now, I can't edit Lightning Web Components from here, but I can see them if I have actually moved them into my org. You can see I have nothing right now. However, I am already debugging this Lightning Web Component using local development. So how does that work? Well, basically what we're doing is we are emulating the Lightning Web runtime in a local server so that this web page can go to this localhost web server that's been stood up and access locally available web component files. How cool is that? And just to highlight how cool this is, I'm just going to go and make a few changes. So I already have, you can see here, I've got my account list, I've got account name, and I'm not even sure what that is. That's probably number of employees. So let's go and add some stuff, and let's also make this a little bit nicer looking. So for instance, like I can't tell really where one of these begins or ends. So I'll add some CSS to this. I'll add some additional data from Salesforce. And I'm not going to make it super pretty, but you can at least see the local development process in process. So already I've got my name and my number of employees fields. And I'm just going to duplicate this last one, which is formatted number. Now, so I already have number of employees. This one is going to be annual revenue. And then this one, it's not going to be a formatted number. It's going to be a formatted phone. So let's make this one phone. And I'm going to say formatted phone. Okay. All right. Now, all I need to do is go back, and you can see that my local server version of this web component has already updated. So basically, we do a live refresh. We're observing, using Git, basically. We're observing changes that are made to those files. And as those files change, we go and update them. So let's go back and make a couple of other changes. So first thing is, I'm just going to make the background of all of these P components a different color so they kind of jump out. And then I'm going to put some padding on my div. So here, P background color, and let's make it light gray. So that'll just give it enough highlight that we'll be able to kind of see some differentiation between each of them. And then my div will go and give this a padding of just 3 pixels. And if I go back, I went back quick enough that you can see it does the refresh, and then just like that, I've got my changes. So, one of the big things that tends to slow down front-end development on Salesforce, or has tended to slow down front-end development, is to see my change, I need to go and, I need to push it up to the server, and then I need to refresh the server. So I need to refresh my page. In this case, and what I will say is not 100% of components are supported by local development, but we're trying to get there. In this case, though, this level of development, I can go in, make those changes. I can see them immediately. I don't even need to refresh. I just need to have the browser. In fact, if I have a couple of monitors, I could have the browser active on one. I could be making my changes on the other and see those changes come up immediately. So how cool is that? I think that's a really powerful feature. And it's been really enjoyable to use that from time to time. What I will say is that I've been working on a lot of pre-release features and beta features recently. Those do not get rolled out immediately. However, for anything that is generally available, for the most part, that isn't super dependent on server side things, it's pretty cool to see what you can do with local development. All right.
Question though, does it also handle caching of server-side data, Salesforce data? Like in this example, or
so
like if you're doing it offline, right?
Yeah. Well, no, this is actually live data from Salesforce. Yeah. So, and that is actually a really important distinction to make. This is not offline development. Mm-hmm. It is something on the long-term roadmap. They're looking at, how you could do a kind of offline development. In the future, when we can hopefully go back on airplanes, you could be on an airplane, not on, the airplane Wi-Fi, working and be able to be just as productive. So,
right.
Yeah, so that's a really good distinction.
Correct me if I'm wrong. So basically the code in itself is basically on the local server, but then it's still getting the data directly from Salesforce then.
That's exactly right.
Got it.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of the complexity that they're solving for us is, obviously if you're developing something for Salesforce, there is a data dependency. The easiest way to solve that data dependency is to just go get the data, right? The harder way is to emulate the data. And that's kind of, I think long-term, that would be something we would all love. But, hopefully in time, right?
Right.
All right.
There's a question here from Ashok Kumar, ready? How to connect with code spaces with Sandbox?
Okay, so I can come back to that when we talk about Code Builder. So, and just to be clear, Code Builder is our OEM of Code Spaces. Code Spaces is just the infrastructure that we're using. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So let's say I've been doing some work and I'm actually going to switch to a real live project that I work on a regular basis. This here is this is
another question here.
Yes.
Basically, does that apply only to LWC or does that also apply to Aura?
No, the local development server is Lightning Web Components only. No worries. So this is an actual live project that I work on. If any of you are familiar with our sample apps, this is the LWC Recipes app. And I just want to talk through a little bit of, what are some of the tools that we use as the developer relations team to build the code that we push out there for people to use as samples and to learn from. And so in LWC Recipes, and this is true for all of our sample apps, there are a bunch of bits of tooling that we're taking advantage of. In my Salesforce project, when we're using the standard Salesforce project structure, there's a few things that we can kind of go through and look at. So first off, sfdx project.json is where we have all the information that's identifying this particular project. Now, with all of our sample apps, we actually generate packages. These are unlocked packages, so that if you want to see and use the sample code, you can actually just deploy the project directly. And that's the name of the actual package that we have right here. So that's in there. There's a source API version that goes in there as well. Now, we actually have some automated tooling that automatically increments some of this stuff. So for example, this package gets automatically generated every time we push into the master branch. And then a process kicks off to create a new package, provision that, test that it actually deploys to an org, and then updates this package version ID here for installation if anybody does that. And then we actually have some linking in the README file on the website so that you can just click on that and it'll go to install that package. Yeah, so that, that's a little bit of, so this is kind of information about the project itself. There are a number of tools that we're using as well, and we actually use Node.js's package.json and Node.js's development dependencies feature to use those tools. So some of these are Salesforce based. For instance, the linting that we do, the static code analysis that we do for LWC, for Aura, those come from these packages that are owned and maintained by Salesforce. Likewise, for testing Lightning Web Components, we're using the Salesforce Jest plugin, SFDX LWC Jest. And that's actually what I've been working on that I'm going to go and deploy in a moment here up to GitHub. We're also doing some code formatting with Prettier. We do pre-commit hooks with Husky. So there's a bunch of stuff in here that basically is how we go in and keep the project so that all of our projects have a predictable shape. All of our code is following standard best practices in formatting. And we can take advantage of a lot of the tooling that's been built by Salesforce. And I want you to remember this because this is going to be really important when we talk about Code Builder. What are a few other things? We can actually access some of these things by running npm scripts. So for example, I can actually go and run npm run test unit. And in fact, one of the things I've been working on is to write a test for a new component that I created, showcasing a new feature in summer 20. And if I go up here, there we go. It's this component here. And you can see by the red this is something that I've added recently. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the built-in terminal here. And I'm going to clear that so I can see it more at the top. And it's not super big, but hopefully you'll be able to see this. I'm going to write npm. Yes, run test unit. Now what this is going to do is go through and it's going to execute every test. Now, I did run these and they did pass recently, so I should get everything passing. If I don't, that's going to be an interesting thing because I hadn't planned for that in my demo. And actually something already failed. Oh, yeah, I know what that is. So we're going to come back to that in a second. All right. And I know what I did now. So this actually isn't the branch I want to push. So I'm actually working on a branch here that I have a test that's failing. I think I know why, but for the time being, I'm going to be happy with another version of this test. So really quickly, I'm just going to clear again so you can see, and I'm going to do git checkout. And this branch should be called PC/. I think it's this one here. No, that's interesting. There we go. And let's take a look at this. Yes, this should be it. So one more time. Now I could go and do npm run test unit again. One of the nice things about Visual Studio Code is that there are plugins that you can use. And this one is a just testing overlay. So this little run test link right here is really cool because I can actually invoke just this one jest test and see what the result is going to be. And so if I click on that, I can see the output here in a moment. There we go. The other thing is, again, this is all local. I can actually run the test and debug it. So I'm not able to see. There we go. So here is the actual Lightning Web component I'm testing. And you can see I've added a debug breakpoint right here. So I'm going to go ahead and run this test as debug. And I want to see, like, let's say it was failing for some reason. I wanted to understand why. I could run the test as debug, and I could get a sense for, like, what are all the data values going on in here. So, sure enough, this particular component is fairly simple. It is a component that's just to demonstrate the use of custom permissions in a Lightning Web component. And maybe for some reason I wasn't seeing the DOM that I was expecting to see. I could go in here and I could just hover over some of these things and understand, okay, so that's the value that's coming back there, that's being passed through there, and then the getter is going to return that. So I can also see information that might be in a global context. If there are any other imports and I want to understand what those are, those will be under this closure heading here. So really useful again. How can you do debugging? Well, one way is you could push it up to your org and you could use your browser tools. Perfectly accessible, and that works great. But if you're not sure why, or maybe you're getting a behavior where it's working in the browser but failing in a test, which actually happened to me recently, you might need to go in and debug the test itself. And so this just overlay makes it super easy to access the debugging tools. All right, so I'm going to quit out of my debugging session here, and I'm going to go back, and there we go. So you can see here where it actually said, okay, there's my debugger attached, and then that, then that's allowed me to go and get access to all of that. All right, so eventually I'm going to be happy with my code, and I probably want to push it up so that I can actually file a pull request against my my actual repo. And everything looks really good here. One thing that might be good for me to check is to do some linting. And in this case, one of the fixes that I was making was actually to this file right here. And so to do that linting, again, I can do npm run. Oh gosh, is it just lint? I'm just going to double check. Yeah, npm run lint. And you can see what it's going to do is it's going to run lint LWC and run lint or. So it's going to lint kind of everything in there. And there we go. So that's going to go through and it's going to look for every single file to make sure that it was correct. And so far that looks good. And then the last thing I'm going to do is do some code formatting. And code formatting is actually what makes it so that you don't have to actually worry about how many characters wide your code is going to be, et cetera, et cetera. And you can actually see how this works. If I go and just change something about this file, I'm just going to kind of put that on the same line. And then I'm going to run npm run prettier. And you'll actually see this is going to go through and do the formatting, and it will change the formatting of this file immediately. So and the one that it does change should be highlighted in kind of a bold color. There we go. Oh, actually, I don't use JSON. There we go. That's the one right there. And you can see now it's actually updated that file. Now, interestingly, that put my Git state back into unchanged because that was what I had committed in the first instance. And the nice thing about using rule-based formatting is that you don't have to argue. You can just set the rules in, and then hopefully your pull requests can go through faster, because if you trust your formatting tool, then you don't need to worry about, was this indented the right number of times? And, when you're doing code reviews, you don't need to look for those kinds of things. They should be just there. All right, so with all of that, now there's a couple of ways that I can do this. What I will say is that I'm so familiar with using Git on the command line that I actually don't really understand using Git in Visual Studio Code. But if you're just getting started with it, Visual Studio Code does have some pretty powerful tools to go through and do and to manage your version control, through the user interface. Like I said, I'm just very comfortable and familiar with using this, so I'm just going to do git push origin pc/perm mod fix. Just like that. All right, and so there you can see that it's pushed it up to that repo. I can actually go and follow link, and that is actually going to open up our LWC recipes repo. And so kind of walking through here, I've got my merge from that branch into master. I'll go ahead and start this PR. I'm going to sort of shorthand some of this just to save time. This adds a basic test to the permission-based UI component. We can expand on it later. Okay. I could assign a reviewer. I'm not going to do that right now because I don't want to bug my colleagues on a Saturday. I could assign myself to it. I could add a label, and some of the labels that we have, for instance, if you have something that's going to contain a new test, you might want to flag it as such. And this is actually tied to an issue. So I'm going to say that's issue number 340 right there. I'll go ahead and create my pull request. All right, and that's going to kick off a few things. Now, these checks are actually GitHub Actions, and GitHub Actions are configurable automated processes that you can run against your version control system. This is basically your CI/CD flow, but it's hosted in Git. If you're using something like CircleCI or Travis or something like that, Jenkins, we actually have a bunch of sample projects that give you the configuration or YAML files to run those other version control systems. We actually used to use CircleCI, but when GitHub Actions came out, we pivoted and we went into GitHub Actions. But obviously, whatever your developer workflow is that's set up, you're going to probably want to use that anyway. So I'm just going to let this run. It takes about 10 minutes because some of the tests that we do are to actually take this project and deploy it to an org and then run all the Apex tests. Another test that we do, another automated process, is to generate a package and then see if that deploys, right? So there's a bunch of things that we do in here that I'm not going to worry about at this moment in time. I'm not going to wait for those. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the process that we go through as a team to ensure that we're deploying code in a consistent way, in a way that's accessible and viewable by our Salesforce developers out in the ecosystem, and a little bit of how we're using CI and CD tools to kind of follow that flow. Any questions on any of that so far? I covered a lot. I went through and did local development. I then pivoted to a different package, project rather, and I showed you how to use some of the local tools, how to do testing, how to do code formatting and linting, and then a little bit on, once we get those changes up to GitHub, how do we handle those? So any questions there?
So far, so good. Am I correct?
So-
All of the features that you showed us would be included in the code builder. Is that right?
So
Be a subset.
let me go ahead and move to code builder, I think, because I think
Right.
that's the important thing. What we've been seeing so far is the local installation of Visual Studio Code that is in my environment on my laptop. And I think one of the interesting things that you need to think about is a lot of the stuff that I was doing was actually directly on my file system, right? So in the world of a web-based IDE, where does that file system live? And that's, I think, one of the most important things for people to think about when you imagine what Code Builder will be. One of the obstacles that we found for a lot of people in using Visual Studio Code is that sometimes as a consultant developer, you don't actually have access to your local file system. So maybe you're working on a machine that was given to you by your client that has access to their IT systems. However, you are not made an administrator user environment. To go through the hoops to be able to install those on that machine can be very, very difficult. And that's also true for even if you're not a consultant, but in some cases in industries or in businesses where there is a high degree of IT trust that has to be enacted, sometimes the the application development team of IT departments don't have admin access to their local operating system. So that can also be an obstacle to using Visual Studio Code. With Code Builder, what you will have backing Code Builder is a virtual machine hosted in the cloud. So actually what's going to happen is you'll go through a process of standing up an instance. And that instance of Code Builder is a persistent virtual machine that is user specific. So as a user of Code Builder connected to a Salesforce org, that virtual machine is going to be tied to you. Nobody else will have access to it, but it will be running an operating system that will be able to host the Salesforce command line. It will be able to host NPM packages for development. It will be able to host your CI and CD plugins. If you want to run Z Shell instead of Bash, you'll be able to do that. So you now have a virtual machine that you can do software development on that is completely free of any of the policies and rules that are specific to your physical machine that you have to do work on as a developer. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit. And I think that's really important to, that's a really important takeaway from, what exactly is Code Builder? Certainly we want Code Builder to be as accessible and easy to use as Developer Console is today. Like that is absolutely a goal. we want Code Builder to be able to support a full-fledged pro code development environment, just like we showed you. And long-term, we also want Code Builder to also be the tool that, you just need to log in and make, a change to one line of Apex code, do it, commit it, and then be done with it. We want it to be just as easy to do that task as well. And there are a bunch of features that are currently, that are features of things like Workbench or Developer Console that, our goal is to eventually have feature parity with those tools. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, great.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit more about Code Builder. I'm done with my demo part. However, we can kind of go in here and go back into the deck, and we can, there's a few highlights that these slides call out that I'll try to call out, and then I'll play a final demo, and then I'll be done. So
we have another question here.
Yeah.
Is Code Builder already in GA?
No, Code Builder is in a closed pilot at this moment in time. There was a huge demand for a very small number of spaces for the pilot. Because Code Builder uses this virtual machine, as part of the pilot, we had to limit it to a fairly small number of users. And I think one of the things that they're really going to be working on is how to make sure that, that all the infrastructure underneath Code Builder is going to scale, and it's going to meet the needs of all the developers that we know really want to use Code Builder. So, all right. So a few features of Code Builder, as we said, it is really a web-based IDE. It's going to be full-featured as far as the things that you can do with it. And the nice thing is, I kind of mentioned about Developer Console versus Visual Studio Code. Essentially, those are two completely discrete code bases. Any change we want to make, if we want to make it and we wanted to make it for both, we would have to do double the effort, right? We would have to go in and change how it worked in Visual Studio Code and those plugins. We would also have to go into Developer Console and change all the stuff about Developer Console. The nice thing about using Code Builder is that essentially the infrastructure of Code Builder is Visual Studio Code running through a browser. So anything that we build as part of the plugins for Visual Studio Code, the client-side application, should work seamlessly in the Code Builder features as well. So that's going to be a really, really positive thing. Also, if you've already adopted Visual Studio Code, it should be really natural to use that. And then because it has this virtual machine backing it, it's going to be fairly straightforward to install custom tools and then also make your workflow fit with whatever your CI/CD or source-driven application lifecycle management process is going to be as a project or as a team. All right, I think that covers everything there. So this talks about some of the features that we're looking to implement as part of Code Builder. Obviously Code Builder and VS Code are kind of the core of this. The web tools and extensions are things like the Salesforce extensions for VS Code. Now, local development, it doesn't really make sense when your virtual machine is in the cloud, but that feature, we are looking for how to bring that feature into the Code Builder infrastructure as well that I just showed you. SOCL Query Builder, we talked about that. And then doing things like data operations. I found one of the things I find super powerful about Developer Console is things like the query builder and the query writer, right? So you can write a query, or you can actually go in, you can bring up an S object, you can select fields, and you can kind of generate basic queries from there as well. So there's actually almost a query builder in Developer Console as well. What else? The language servers, you saw when I was building some of the stuff I was building that there's some autocomplete and IntelliSense going on there. those are performed by these language servers. These are basically little processes that run in the background in Visual Studio Code and give you the tokens and names of things that you might want to add into your code as you're typing. So those will be there as well. And then because of the virtual machine, we have all the CLI testing, debuggers, and those things that we can access as well. Likewise, we can also do integration to whatever your version control or your CI process is. As I've said several times in this presentation, one of the obstacles to adopting Visual Studio Code we know is that in certain cases, getting IT approval for desktop tools can be very troublesome for projects. And for this reason, we know a lot of people use Developer Console on a day-to-day basis in their Salesforce development. So having a web-based tool that IT departments can approve sort of wholeheartedly, and then they can also control to some degree, because they can control what that to some degree what that virtual machine image is going to behave like. It gives you more ability to use modern Salesforce developer tooling as well. So, as opposed to all these other things that you have to do to kind of prep to run Visual Studio Code, maybe it's just start, run Code Builder, and then code. All right. Anything else here? I think I've talked about all these things. I didn't talk about that much about the org browser. There is a really cool tool that's in Visual Studio Code called the org browser. And it's a great way to understand what's the current metadata shape of your org. Yeah, I've kind of talked about all this stuff. Yeah. And then this actually has a mock-up of the query builder, just to make it clear, like this is not what the final thing is going to be, but you can see here that there's sort of I can select my S object, my fields from the S object. I can specify certain SOCL query semantics that I might want to add to my query, et cetera, and then I can output my query there. Actually, that's the same one there. All right, so that wraps up the things I wanted to talk about as far as, actually, no, I did have a short demo, I promised. So let's quickly do that. And then we'll do some open Q&A. All right, and off we go with the demo.
Hi everyone, my name is Ananya and I'm a software engineer on the Platform Developer Tools team here at Salesforce. Today, I'm going to help you get efficient with your Salesforce development. So the first thing you might notice is that the screen doesn't look quite exactly like Visual Studio Code, and that's because it's not. Today, we're working inside of a brand new product called Salesforce Code Builder, currently in pilot. Code Builder is a development environment that runs in your browser, so you get access to modern tooling through the Salesforce extensions while keeping your developer console flow of going to your org and clicking a button to open a new tab with your workspace. So today, I'm going to go through my usual flow in developer console here inside of Code Builder. The first thing I always do is make sure I'm authorized into an org. So if you click on the org picker down here, it pops open a list of all the different orgs you've previously authenticated into, and it gives you the option of authorizing a new org, a dev hub, or creating a default Scratch org. For now, I've already authenticated into an org, which you can see by the text demo run down here. Cool. So now let's open up the class that I was working on Friday. I have a feeling that someone on my team may have worked on it over the weekend, so I want to compare what I have locally to what might exist in my org. I can do this by hitting right-click and hitting diff file against org. What this does is it grabs the file from your org and pops it open on the left-hand side and shows you what you have locally on the right side. And I can see very clearly that obviously something has changed. So let's make sure that I have the most up-to-date version. I could do that by right-clicking and hitting retrieve the source from org, but then I wouldn't get to show off our super cool org browser. So if you look at this cloud icon here, It opens up a list of all the different metadata types that you have available to you in your org. If you expand on one of them, you can see all the different components associated with that metadata type. For now, I'm going to hit the download icon so that I can retrieve the latest version. And it's letting me know that I am going to overwrite what I have locally. Cool. So now that I have my up-to-date test class, let's actually run this test. I can do that by hitting this beaker icon on the left side, and it pops open this view that is going to show me all the Apex tests that I have available up here. And you might notice it is also showing me the Lightning Web Component tests that I have, because another cool feature of Code Builder and VS Code is that you're able to work with your Lightning Web Components and Aura components in here as well. For now, let's go ahead and run my test set brightness. And while that's running, you might notice that this text over here also gives you the option of running the test from directly inside of the class as well. Awesome. And I can see that my test is run successfully from this green dot, and it is showing me all the code coverage that I need down here. The thing is, I'm more of a visual person, so I would rather see exactly how much of my class is being covered. And I can do that by hitting this little hamburger icon down here. This is going to show up on the right-hand side, and it lets me know that the ones in green are the ones that are covered by my test, and the ones in red are the ones that are yet to be covered, which is great. Okay, cool. So now that we've run our test, we know it's successful, I want to get a deeper look into what exactly is happening with our test class. And I want to use our replay debugger to do that. So the first thing I'll do is set a few breakpoints on the left side here. And now there's a few different commands you need to use to set up the replay debugger. The first thing is going to be turn on Apex debug log for replay debugger. You can tell that I already have done this step because down here it's showing me that I'm recording my logs until 12:43 a.m. The next thing you want to do is actually get the Apex debug logs. So essentially what's going on in the background is that we've turned on logging for any events that you're doing within your org. So after these logs get generated in your org, you then have to go ahead and download them using the get apex debug log command we just ran. And now that I have my debug log open, I can hit right click and hit launch Apex Replay Debugger. And what this will do is it's going to launch the native VS Code debugger and allow me to step through all of those breakpoints that I set earlier. And if I wanted, I could have also launched it using this green arrow on the left-hand side. Cool. So now if I hit next, I can see I'm stepping into the test method that I set all of my breakpoints inside of, and I'm getting to see exactly what's going on. So thank you all for joining me today. I know we went over a lot of information, but I hope you enjoyed your sneak peek into the new Salesforce Code Builder. And again, everything that we covered today is currently available in Visual Studio Code, so make sure to check it out. Thank you.
So cool. I will go ahead and stop screen sharing. And, if there are any further questions, is there anything in the chat? Is Codebo? No, that was the last one already.
Any other questions, guys? It's definitely a mouthful, though. What would you recommend in terms of being able to dig in deeper in terms of being able to fully utilize Visual Studio Code? Like any specific resources that you'd recommend aside from Trailhead?
So there are definitely some. There are a couple of Trailhead modules on developing. I think they're called developing with Salesforce DX, I think that's probably the easiest way to kind of walk through. What are the things that you need to do from that standpoint? One thing that I know we have coming is we're trying to start to create more short videos. And one of the developer evangelists is working on some, on a couple of videos that are, here is installing the Visual Studio Code tooling from nothing to I'm building in my project. So those videos aren't out yet, but it's a project he's working on, and hopefully within the next few weeks we should have those available on the the YouTube channel for Salesforce developers. So we're also looking to put out more of these short videos. So if you're not subscribed to the Salesforce Developers YouTube channel, I would strongly recommend go and start to follow there as new videos start to come out. And we will also be announcing those on Twitter. So if you're following us on Twitter, you should see announcements about that too. I'm trying to think if there are any, a couple of other really good resources. And what I could do is I could take a look and see if I could kind of put together a set of links for this. But there are some good videos from past Dreamforces or TrailheaDXs where developer evangelists kind of walk through, like, here's how we're using Visual Studio Code today. So I think those are also really effective. And if anything that I did today you found helpful, you're recording this, right? So, so you can always go back and watch that.
Yeah, I'll also have
obviously.
it posted on YouTube. So
excellent, cool. Yeah. So if there are any other questions, I'll pop my contact information into the chat. People can grab that. The easiest way to contact me, is probably to just direct message me on Twitter. My DMs are open. And if you kind of just mention who you are and where you heard me, or I'm happy to look at those. And so far nobody has trolled me, so I'm just going to keep those open for now. But Twitter's a weird place. You never know what's going to happen there, right? So.
Right. Any other questions, guys? If not, thank you again, Peter. It's definitely a great privilege to have you on our group here in the Philippines. Hopefully, once this is all over, we can have you in person too, right?
I would love to. I've never been to the Philippines. I think that would be an amazing experience to do something like that. But still, it's a huge pleasure to be able to come to you this morning, even from distance.
Yep. Thank you again, then. So, Fransley and Kevin, for the next item.
All right. Thank you again, Peter, for your for sharing your knowledge. Right. So up next, if you don't have any other questions, we prepared a simple game. Right. It's like a quiz bee, and then we'll be choosing the top 3 winners. So the top 3 winners will get certification vouchers. So we'll have 2 sets of questions, 5 questions per set. So if anyone is ready, right, last call for questions. No more? All right, then Alvin, can you share your screen, please, for the game? All right, cool. So if you attended